How could I ever tell my mom and dad that their own trusted brother, my uncle, took advantage of me in the most painful, intimate way? Will they even believe me? Or will they say I'm lying just to protect him?
You should be grateful to have an uncle like me. You have to do this. You're not a baby anymore. I'm only trying to help you. You must never tell your parents what happened tonight. If you do, you'll only bring shame to yourself and no one will believe you.
Claire was a beautiful, humble girl with a gentle soul. Life seemed peaceful until her parents traveled abroad for a work visa and left her in the care of her uncle. What they didn't know was that the man they trusted was a monster hiding behind a smile. Within just 1 week, he shattered Claire's world. But before we dive into this heartbreaking story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to The Global Storyteller.
My name is Claire, and when I turned 16, I truly believed life was just beginning. My parents had just gotten a work visa to travel abroad for a job opportunity, and they promised they'd be back in a year. In the meantime, they arranged for me to stay with my uncle, Uncle Ray, my dad's younger brother. At first, it didn't seem like a bad idea. Uncle Ray had always been the funny one at family gatherings. He lived alone in a nice 3-bedroom apartment in Houston, and the night I arrived, he brought home pizza and told me to make myself comfortable. "You're a young woman now," he said. "Time to enjoy a little freedom." The first few days felt normal. I went to school, helped with chores, and spent my evenings watching Netflix. Uncle Ray was around, sometimes too much. He'd knock before entering my room, but linger longer than necessary. Sometimes he touched my hair or rubbed my shoulder and said things like, "You're growing into a fine young lady." I'd smile awkwardly, not sure how to respond. One evening, while I was watching a movie in the living room, he sat down beside me, too close. His arm brushed mine and he didn't move it. I shifted slightly, pretending I needed something, but then he leaned in and whispered, "You know, you're even more beautiful than your mom was at your age." My stomach twisted. I forced a small laugh, stood up quickly, and said, "Good night, Uncle." That night, I locked my bedroom door, for the first time. The days that followed were tense. He started calling me sweetheart instead of Claire. He bought me gifts I didn't ask for, fancy perfumes, tight clothes, and told me not to tell my parents. I didn't understand what was happening, but it made me uncomfortable. Still, I didn't want to be rude. He was family. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe I was being too dramatic. But deep down, something didn't feel right. And still, I stayed silent. I smiled. I said thank you. Until one night he knocked, and didn't wait for me to answer the door. I wish I could forget that night. I wish I could erase it from my memory and pretend it never happened. But some nights, some pain, bury themselves too deep to ever disappear. It started with a storm. Rain tapping hard against the windows, thunder rumbling above like the sky was angry. I was in bed wearing an oversized t-shirt, scrolling through my phone, when I heard the knock. I didn't answer. I hoped he'd go away. But this time he didn't. The door creaked open slowly. Uncle Ray stepped in without a word, just staring at me. I pulled the blanket up to my chest. "Uncle," I whispered. "Is something wrong?" He didn't reply. He walked in, closed the door behind him, and sat at the edge of my bed. I froze. My heart was pounding so loudly, I thought it would shake the room. "You've been acting distant," he said, his voice low. "I just want to talk." I nodded quickly, hoping he'd leave once he said whatever was on his mind. But then he placed his hand on my knee. I flinched. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're just so grown now. So beautiful. You don't even know what you're doing to me." My throat tightened. I tried to get up, but he held me down. I said his name. I begged. I cried. But it was like he had become someone else. Someone cold. Someone I didn't know. He tied my hand and have his way with me, then untie me. When it was over, I couldn't move. I lay still, my body aching, my mind floating somewhere far away. Uncle Ray stood up, fixed his shirt, and whispered, "Don't tell anyone. No one will believe you anyway." He left my room and closed the door behind him like nothing happened. I stared at the ceiling all night. I didn't cry anymore. I couldn't. I felt like I had disappeared, like a part of me had been stolen and wouldn't come back. I kept replaying the night in my head, wondering if I did something wrong, if I missed a sign. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my fault. Still, I said nothing. I went to school the next day like everything was fine. Smiled at my classmates. Answered questions in class. But inside, I was breaking. After that night, nothing felt real anymore. I moved through each day like a ghost, floating from one class to another, smiling when I had to, nodding when someone spoke to me. But inside, I was completely numb. At home, I avoided Uncle Ray as much as I could. I locked my door every night, even when he knocked and called my name. Sometimes he laughed behind the door. Sometimes he got angry and banged on it. But I stayed silent. I was too scared, too broken. I thought about calling my parents, but what would I say? That their trusted brother had hurt me? That I was no longer the daughter they left behind, safe and whole? They had sacrificed so much to give me a better life. I didn't want to ruin it for them. I didn't want to be the reason everything fell apart. So I carried it alone. Weeks passed. My body began to feel strange. I was tired all the time, even after a full night's sleep. My stomach felt weird in the mornings, and sometimes I couldn't keep food down. I told myself it was stress, or maybe something I ate. But I was lying to myself. I avoided mirrors because my eyes had lost their light. I avoided friends because I didn't want anyone to ask questions. I stopped laughing. I stopped dancing. The girl I used to be faded quietly. One afternoon, my best friend Lena pulled me aside after class. "Claire, what's going on with you?" she asked, eyes full of concern. "You're not okay." I wanted to tell her. I really did. The words sat in my throat, but they wouldn't come out. I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." "Tired doesn't make your eyes look like that," she said softly. But I shook my head and walked away. That night, I stood in the shower and let the water pour over me for what felt like an hour. I scrubbed and scrubbed, but I still felt dirty. My body wasn't mine anymore. My silence had become my shield, and my prison. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell someone. But fear had made its home in me. And silence is heavy. Lena didn't stop checking on me. Every day, she watched me closer. She'd ask if I ate, if I slept, if I was feeling sick. And every time, I gave her the same tired lie. "I'm fine." But Lena knew better. She had always known how to read me, even when I wore my best mask. One Friday morning, I nearly collapsed in the school hallway. My vision blurred, my knees buckled, and the last thing I heard was Lena screaming my name. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the nurse's bed. The lights above me felt too bright, and my head pounded. "You need to see a doctor," Lena said firmly, her arms crossed. I shook my head. "I can't. You have to. Claire, this isn't just stress. You're pale, tired, and something's clearly wrong. Let me take you." I stared at her, and for the first time in weeks, my walls cracked. I nodded. We went to a small clinic outside of town that afternoon. It was quiet. The nurse was kind. She asked me a few questions, then gently suggested a pregnancy test. My heart dropped. I don't think that's necessary." By the next morning, her entire family was at my side, holding me like I was their own. They told me I couldn't go back to Uncle Ray's house. They didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. They just protected me. Then came the hardest part. My mother had just landed in New York. It was 3 a.m. her time when I finally called her. I sat in Lena's room, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My voice trembled as I said, "Mom, something happened." At first, she was calm, concerned. "Are you okay, Claire? What's going on?" But when I told her about the pregnancy, about Uncle Ray, her voice disappeared. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "What did you just say?" Tears streamed down my face. I repeated it. Every word felt heavier than the last. She screamed. Not at me, but out of pain. Out of disbelief. It wasn't just crying. It was a cry that broke through the phone and into my bones. "How could this happen?" she yelled. "I trusted him. He was your family. My brother." I didn't say a word. I just sobbed. Then her voice changed. Low. Angry. "Where is he? Where is that monster?" I told her I wasn't at his house anymore, that Lena's family had taken me in. She didn't ask why I didn't speak sooner. She didn't scold me. She just kept saying, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry I wasn't there." 2 days later, my mother was on the next flight home. When she saw me at the airport, she dropped her bags and ran to me. She held me like I was made of glass, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I'm going to fix this. I promise." That night, we didn't sleep. We sat on Lena's couch, her hand in mine, as we made a report. The police took it seriously. An officer came by the next morning. Uncle Ray was arrested before the sun had even set. I thought I'd feel relief, but all I felt was tired, drained, like I had used the last of my strength to speak. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The court date came faster than I expected. 1 minute, I was a high school senior trying to survive each day. The next, I was standing in a courtroom, staring across the room at the man who had destroyed my innocence, my own uncle. He looked so different behind that defendant's stand. No more smiles. No jokes. Just a blank face, as if he were the victim. His hands were cuffed. His suit was wrinkled. And for a second, I wondered if he felt any shame. But when our eyes met, I saw nothing. No guilt. No fear. Just coldness. The judge called my name. I stood slowly, legs trembling, my mother holding my hand until the very last second. I walked to the witness stand, took a shaky breath, and raised my right hand. I swore to tell the truth. And I did. I told them everything. From the first uncomfortable moment to the night that changed everything. My voice broke, but I didn't stop. I cried, but I didn't look away. I made sure the truth echoed in that room. Every word clear, every moment real. People gasped. Some wept. But I didn't. I had already run out of tears. Uncle Ray's lawyer tried to twist my words. "Why didn't you report it immediately?" he asked. "Why stay quiet for weeks?" I looked him dead in the eye. Because I was terrified. Because he told me no one would believe me. Because sometimes, silence feels safer than truth. My voice didn't shake that time. And for the first time, I saw something flicker on Uncle Ray's face. Maybe fear. Maybe regret. But it was too late for both. When I stepped down, my mother stood up and clapped once, tears streaming down her face. The judge banged his gavel for silence, but I saw the pride in her eyes. That was enough. The court process dragged on for weeks. But eventually, the truth won. Uncle Ray was sentenced. I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. Justice had already been served in my heart the moment I spoke up. I went home that day not with a smile, but with peace. A quiet kind of peace. The kind you only get after you've faced your monster and survived. The months that followed felt like I was walking through someone else's life. I was 16 in my final year of high school and pregnant. The court case was over, but my journey was far from finished. My belly grew, and so did the weight of it all. The fear, the shame, the questions. People whispered. Some stared. Some avoided me altogether. Even classmates who once laughed with me now walked past without a word. I became that girl. The one with the tragic story. I hated it. There were days I didn't want to eat. Days I didn't want to wake up. I'd lie in bed and wonder if the baby inside me could feel my sadness, my hesitation. Was it wrong to feel disconnected from a life growing inside me? Was it okay to not want this child? One night, I broke down in my mother's arms. "I don't want the baby," I sobbed. "I didn't choose this." She didn't say much. She just held me and whispered, "You don't have to love everything about the story, Claire. But you get to choose how it ends." That stayed with me. When the baby came, it was a quiet morning. The nurses were kind. They asked if I wanted to hold him. At first, I refused. I couldn't even look. I just lay there, exhausted, waiting for it to be over. But then I heard a cry. Strong. Alive. And something in me shifted. They brought him over. Placed him in my arms. He was tiny, wrinkled, and his fingers wrapped around mine like he'd been waiting for me all along. I stared at him, not as a mistake, but as a beginning. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply. "His name?" the nurse asked gently. I paused. "Hope," I said quietly. "His name is Hope." Because that's what he was. Not a reminder of pain, but a symbol of survival. A reason to rise again. A reason to heal. I didn't choose this path, but maybe, just maybe, I could choose to walk it with strength. Used to think healing would come like thunder, loud, obvious, crashing through my pain with light and power. But healing doesn't arrive like that. It sneaks in slowly, like the morning sun, unnoticed at first, until suddenly you realize the darkness has faded. Life didn't go back to normal. It built something new. Hope cried a lot in the beginning. Late nights, early mornings. Diapers, feedings, learning how to hold him, how to comfort him. There were moments I sat on the edge of the bed, wondering if I could really do it. Be a mother. At 16. To a child I didn't plan for. But each time his small hand touched my skin, I found another reason to keep going. I started therapy. At first, I hated it. Talking made everything real again. But week after week, I kept showing up. My therapist never rushed me. She listened. She reminded me that what happened to me was not me. That I still had a future. That I was not broken, just rebuilding. School was hard. I had to repeat the semester I missed. People still talked. But I stopped caring. I walked with my head up, holding my books in one hand, and pushing Hope's stroller with the other. Some days were harder than others. I'd cry in the shower, or stare at the mirror, wondering who I had become. But other days I laughed again. Real laughter. Lena stayed by my side. My mom became my biggest supporter. And slowly, I made peace with my story. One afternoon, I stood in front of my class and gave a speech about strength. I didn't mention the court case, or the nights I cried myself to sleep. I didn't say my uncle's name, but I spoke from my heart. I learned that survival isn't always loud, I told them. Sometimes it's getting out of bed. Sometimes it's telling the truth. Sometimes it's holding your child and deciding to love anyway. Afterward, my classmates clapped. I smiled, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that says I made it. Hope giggled in the back row, playing with Lena's keys. And in that moment, I knew healing had come. Quiet, but sure. Sometimes life breaks us in ways we never see coming. Claire was just a girl, trusting, hopeful, innocent, until someone she called family stole a piece of her she could never get back. But what he didn't know was that her silence was never weakness. It was strength gathering. She spoke up. She stood tall. And when the world expected her to fall apart, she chose to rise, with a baby in her arms and courage in her chest. Healing didn't come all at once. It came quietly, in late-night feedings, therapy sessions, long walks, and whispered prayers. It came in learning to love again, not just the child she birthed, but the woman she was becoming. To every girl who's been silenced, to every soul carrying pain in secret, remember. You are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become after. And just like Claire, you can turn your scars into light. Because healing isn't loud, but it's real. And it's yours.